Acronyms. In our very technical hobby of amateur radio, or perhaps not even amateur radio, just another technical hobby, or maybe your workplace, they're everywhere. People use acronyms to convey a whole lot of words into just a really simple little phrase. Sometimes they get a little moniker or nickname, but generally it's a couple of letters that they are called out, like APRS. Oftentimes we use it as a convenience, but sometimes people use it to almost fool people into thinking they know a lot more about things than they really do. I am going to today tell you how to conquer acronyms and make them very simple to deal with, sometimes avoid completely, or unravel their secret information. And why I believe I'm actually a good person to tell you about this is not because of my YouTube channel, but it's because of the 19 years that I have worked as a professional engineer and now engineering manager. And that was all work where the customer was pretty much some form of the US government. And if you think engineers have a lot of acronyms, I'll tell you the military and insert anything else has a ton of acronyms too. Key point, here's a coaster of a program that I used to support back in the day. Some of you will be familiar with this. This is also an acronym. Family of Advanced Beyond Line of Sight Terminals. What does that translate into? FAB-T. I spent 9 years on this program. Anyway, not about this. So the secret for understanding acronyms is context. Context is the secret. If you can figure out the context in and around where that acronym is used, it will make your entire life easier. And for those that don't have the actual Webster's dictionary in front of them, an acronym is simply a way of taking a bunch of words, taking the first letter from each word, and then using those first letters all conjoined and squished together to convey what those larger words mean. So we use one in amateur radio a lot called single side band, which is SSB. And then there are little tweaks on that one. We also use USB and LSB, and the U and the L are upper and lower, upper sideband and lower sideband, something you generals and extras have probably used in the past. But the problem comes for the person that's starting out in amateur radio. They see this just wealth of these gobbledygook letters all strung together, and they say to themselves, what is this actually? I can't decipher this. What does this all mean? And while what I'm going to tell you, context is king, and it's going to remain to be king for the entirety of this video, some of this also does require you to do some real reading is fundamental here in understanding what is being conveyed in the words you're seeing, right? It's not just focus on the acronym, it's focus on everything around the acronym. Here's an example. While researching, I went to the ICOM website and just thought I would read down some of the radios, and literally the first radio that I pulled up, my 7610, my wonderful little radio behind me, right on the home page, there is an acronym that is not provided in description. And by the way, for everybody that's reading this, if you're going to create an acronym in something you write, first give it in long expression, so write out single sideband, and then in quotes use SSB. Then that cues the reader to know that every time they see SSB later in the document, they should read it as single sideband. Pro tip, because acronyms also get reused. I have many experiences with that. But here on the ICOM website, let's take a look at it. Faint signals are no longer a challenge for DXers and contesters around the world with the new IC7610. The high-performance RMDR in the IC7610 has the ability to pick up the faint signals even in the presence of stronger adjacent signals. All right, let's pause there. So, do you know what RMDR stands for exactly? I sure don't. I still don't, and I haven't even looked up what the acronym means yet. But I know enough about it from the context clues of this couple of sentences to know what it's trying to tell me. And those context clues are mentioning the receiver, the front end, the listening thing, the thing that you're listening to when you're using a radio, is the very first part, the very first sentence of that page. And it makes a note of the difference between putting the QSO in the log or trying another time is the capability of your receiver. So it goes boom. The capability of your receiver is the most important thing, right? Okay, now let's add in our acronym sentence. The high-performance RMDR in the 7610 has the ability to pick out the faint signals even in the presence of stronger adjacent signals. Okay, so just from that first paragraph alone, I had a pretty good idea of we're talking about the receiver sensitivity. As I progressed further down the page, I found a nice little PDF, an infographic, if you will. So let's take a look at that infographic really fast, and you can see how we kind of were able to unravel the information without having to fully know every little bit about it. What is RMDR? Well, it's on this infographic. Reciprocal mixing occurs when a strong out-of-band interferer mixes with the phase noise of the receiver's local oscillator to throw noise in the detection passband. RMDR is a receiver measurement defined as the difference in the amount of power in dB, decibels. The higher the MDR, the less impact a strong signal will have over the receiver's capability of hearing a weak signal. And then in simpler terms, we like that sometimes to at least grasp the idea. The higher the RMDR specification, the better the receiver's ability to hear weak signals with a loud station 2 kilohertz away. So, okay, great. We want a radio with higher RMDR than lower RMDR if we're looking to pick up faint DX signals. And what's DX? Long distance, basically, right? Another acronym. I know I'm throwing acronyms at you while trying to explain how to understand acronyms, but hopefully you're picking up the context here. We're trying to hear a weak, far-off signal. That's probably in another country. That's somewhere far away. DX, okay. And he said it's long distance. Okay, I know the acronyms don't line up completely, but that's what the term means. So high RMDR is going to mean that while you may have a local station a couple of kilohertz down the band from you in, a city over, a state over, whatever, somewhere really closer than that DX station, a high RMDR is going to allow your receiver to not be overloaded by those incoming signals closely related or further off related within the band and let you pick up that DX. So, okay, that's an acronym we've now learned. Let's keep this fun train rolling, though, and take a look at Yaesu's website for the new FTM 500. There's a summary here. Let's read through some of it and see if we catch ourselves on an acronym. We are pleased to introduce the new FTM 500DR, a 50-watt C4 FM and FM. So that is an acronym. It's one, C4 FM is used by Yaesu, but FM is pretty much universally standard, right? That's frequency modulation. That might be a term that is so widely used now that you may not need any help knowing that, but they did not define that here. But we do have a context clue. By grouping C4 FM next to FM, one might assume that they are related to each other and should be considered as such. So, okay, we can keep going. This is a dual-band mobile transceiver. The FTM 500 shares Yaesu's advanced core features and utilizes the latest C4 FM digital technology. Okay, so if I didn't know any better, now I know C4 FM is kind of like FM, but it's digital. Okay, so digital voice radio type capability. Okay, good. So here's a good example of breaking down an acronym. Front speaker with AESS, and they used an asterisk. I think this is a bit overkill. Again, you could just write out the whole thing and then use AESS, but hey, Yaesu, you keep doing you. Dual speaker system in AES, there's an asterisk. AESS stands for Acoustic Enhanced Speaker System. Okay, there's an acronym that they broke down because it is kind of new and special to Yaesu in the last two radios that they come out with. So that's a good example of explaining the acronym. Actually, looking through this, Yaesu's done a pretty good job across the board. So E20, easy to operate, innovative smart operating systems with touch and go, search and go, PMG, two asterisks behind that, and then below, PMG stands for Primary Memory Group Monitor. Okay, actually, I don't have a lot of complaints here, but we're left with this nagging question. What is C4FM? And let's see, I do a search for C4FM, and there are 6 mentions of it looking on the page, but they don't go the next step and actually define what the term is. Okay. What do we know of C4FM right now? It's kind of like FM. It works as a type of digital mode, potentially. So if we just Googled C4FM, do we think we could find the definition of the acronym? Let's see. And sure, there is a website right here on Google. If you say C4FM, the first thing you get is, what's C4FM mode? All right. C4FM is a digital modulation for walkie-talkies that hobbyists prefer. It also has a relatively mature history of use in professional digital walkie-talkie applications. Ah, okay, so it's not a Yaesu-specific term, it's a industry term. In fact, it comes from the private industry or commercial industry and has been leveraged for use within these Yaesu radios. Hey, I learned something. I knew this, but, I'm acting like I didn't know it before. Now, being a bit persistent, I wanted to give you the exact abbreviation here, and it comes from a Wireless Society of Maine website, as this is the first website looking at the Google search of just C4FM to actually define it. And they define it as C4FM stands for the Continuous 4-Level Frequency Modulation. Now, this is where I'm going to flip back into my engineering kind of personality, if you will. When I was young and starting out as an engineer, I got tripped up by acronyms. I don't know of an engineer who hadn't or hasn't at this stage in the game. Almost everyone I know, they thought not knowing an acronym was going to be a really bad thing for them, potentially in their career, etc., etc. The reality is that working understanding of what the acronym is probably good enough without you having to go do an Indiana Jones type research hunt to figure out what the acronym stands for. At the same time, the more you look for acronyms, it becomes a lot easier to find them. That was just a quick Google search, and I found that one. In fact, I didn't actually know all of that acronym. I just kind of knew what the system was, and that's good enough for me in almost all cases because I'm not developing for C4FM. I'm just occasionally using it in the form of Yaesu radios. Right? So as a young engineer, what I used to do was I would always have a paper notebook for various reasons. Sometimes you can't bring your phone into certain areas of certain buildings, so having paper notebooks is always really handy. And that's evolved into me as an adult, keeping something like a field notes tablet on my person and a Fisher Space Pen. Shout out to the Fisher Space Pen that you pull the back of it and the ink cartridge comes out so that you can just write immediately without having to take that cap off and posting it. I don't like those Space Pens. I like the one that just pops out. So anyway, that'll be my affiliate link for this video, by the way. If you'd like to get one of those, highly recommended. I also like the field notes and Write in the Rain tablets. Really, really good. Write in the Rain tablets are not so great for the engineering kind of space where the writing needs to be a little crisper, from my personal opinion, having written a lot of notes. But anyway, what's the point of keeping it? So you write down all these acronyms you hear or these terms that people are throwing out so that you can later look them up. All right, so to pull in a completely different radio from a completely different manufacturer, I went to the KX2 website. This is a radio that is made by Elecraft, which is an American company, so we're just rounding it out to different countries and different companies and all that stuff. So right up at the top, it says this is an 80 through 10 meter SSB, CW, and data station that fits in your pocket. Again, these are common terms in amateur radio, but as someone new to the hobby, you might stumble on SSB, which I hope we've explained that to you. And CW, that may be a new term for you. That stands for continuous wave. That is a mode of operation we use for doing Morse code. If we slide down to the overview for the radio, it does mention other Elecraft products, which are a combination of acronym and number. And so you're going to kind of have to know that they make that product. Or if you don't know, what are the context clues to explain that, oh, hey, that's something else I might want to buy along with this radio, or at least know that it exists and is made for that company. Thanks to the state-of-art construction, blah, 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 weighing just 13 ounces, making it the smallest full-featured HF radio on the planet. HF is another common term, high frequency. That is the radio that refracts off the atmosphere, bounces off the upper layers of the atmosphere. Also not really Elecraft's job to explain that to you. That's for your notepad. Write that down. All right, to go look up later. Yet it puts out up to 10 watts, covers 9 bands, and shares many features with the KX3. Okay, context clues. Shares many features with the KX3. I'm looking at the KX2. Odds are good Elecraft makes the KX3. All right, onward. It also works with the KX-PA100 amplifier. That is a completely new set of acronyms and numbers, but it works with the radio I'm looking at, so the odds are probably also good that this is something that Elecraft makes, which they do. It's an amplifier they make. Which is a good transition to the next point. These acronyms that we've talked about today so far have been acronyms that are part of a sentence or used in conjunction with other words or common phrases that we can use to develop this context clues that we've started talking about. There's other examples of where acronyms are used as a title alone with very little information or are part of a bulleted list, like on a PowerPoint slide or presentation you're watching. In those cases, you often have to look out for things like, is this a sub-bullet to a main bullet? And is the main bullet talking potentially about modes of operation, FM, AM, single sideband, CW, digital, right? If those are all new terms to you, you can pull a context clue from them being a part of the larger whole of that main bullet. On the flip side, if you are pulling up a document and it just says APRS on the top of it, and you've never heard of APRS before, and you click the link looking for something that I told you might be interested in, maybe you are, and you find this document, you'd be like, well, I'm not getting any description in this. I don't know what this all is. Well, the hope is at least when they're using titles like that, just throwing them around, they're going to give you that context in the body of the document. So the point, and at least one of the takeaways here, is make sure you read enough about the thing before you throw in the towel that, oh, this thing is just too filthy with acronyms. It's not that it's too filthy with acronyms. It's just that you may be focusing too much on that acronym, and the context that surrounds the acronym is slipping by you. Now, this is going to turn into a little personality thing. Just like in engineering, there are people in amateur radio that use acronyms profusely in their spoken language, in their writing, and they don't define what those acronyms are, seldomly. Then they may not, or likely, are not possessing a great handle on what those acronyms actually mean. For those people, bringing them together with a younger person or a newcomer to anything is likely going to be very difficult for those people to kind of pick up the information. So if you are that new individual and this individual does have a lot of information but keeps throwing out all these acronyms, I would still encourage you to write the acronyms down. This could be literally the field notes notepad like I talked about, and your Space Pen, or your phone app, or a text editor document on your favorite operating system, or just stop the conversation and ask them, what are you talking about, man? What is this acronym? I need to understand this. And you're going to find out really quickly if you weren't sure if this person knew a lot about what they were talking about. If you challenge them on a couple of acronyms that they've failed to define through their discussion and they can't explain what the acronym is, that's one thing. But if you start asking that in addition to like, well, how does this work? What does it do? Not just like, oh, well, we use APRS for that. Well, what does APRS do? I don't know. You like beacon your location and stuff. Like, okay, well, they may not know that much about APRS or some other term. This is just an example. Those are really, really telling hints that the person you're talking to might not be as far down the technical knowledge space that you might think they are. So these are also telling ways that acronyms can be good for you. So a reminder again, what are we going to do if we are seeing a bunch of acronyms and we don't understand what's going on with them? Focus on the context. Understand what is being written in and around the acronym that gives you a hint as to what the acronym does. Oftentimes, some acronyms are industry standard terms, and it's not a company's job to necessarily describe them. For those industry standard terms, like single sideband, again, you should be able to find that very easily. Write the acronym down, search for it, and maybe throw ham radio on your search, or radio, or HF radio, or something like that. You will get a better return, right? Keep it with the context, just like you would do with the search engine. Give the search engine the context for what you're looking for. APRS ham radio. My search returns just got way more valuable. Log everything that you have questions on in a little notepad. And if you then can turn around and decipher them via Google, I've always found that writing stuff down helps me remember it a lot better and kind of store it in my brain, particularly acronyms, so that I can recall them later when I'm talking about them, that I can say HF is high frequency, that kind of thing. And then lastly, if anybody has an issue with acronyms in their use, common use, and they're propped up as like an expert in their field, that could be true, that they just don't have a good time remembering acronyms. But it could also be a hint when you start peppering them with questions on how these things work that they can't really answer you, that you might have to say, okay, we're not exactly sure how knowledgeable this individual is. But always remember, if you have a difficulty with acronyms, it's likely professional people way more experienced than you suffer with them as well. So keep that in mind. They might be there for a justified reason in their dense knowledge, and their ability to recall every acronym is just not very feasible. So cut everybody a little slack. If you are new to ham radio and you find this type of stuff fascinating, I have a link in my channel for all of the videos I've produced in getting you started in ham radio. It says new to ham radio, start here. There is no required order. Click on the playlist, scroll through it, find something that's interested to you, and just dive in and start watching. I'm Josh, KI6NAZ. Thanks so much for watching the Ham Radio Crash Course today. If you enjoyed this, give me a thumbs up. Leave your comments below, particularly if you have conquered your fear of acronyms and how'd you do it. We'd love to pass those tips on to everybody watching. Until I talk to you again, 73.